Hi, Grace. Grace Woods has joined me today. Grace Woods is VP Global Head of Marketing at Patreon. I'm really excited to have you on here. We'll talk about Patreon and just all the cool things that that people are able to do with the platform. But first, more about Grace. So prior to Patreon, Grace held some executive roles at Flexport, Cloudless, which is a Series A startup, and also Salesforce for 5 years. From the Patreon information side, Patreon was founded in 2013. Has over 200 people, and it's based out of San Francisco, California. On the funding side, they have raised Series E, so $258.3 million. And for folks that have not heard about Patreon, it is a creator-founded membership platform that helps creators change the way that their art is valued through direct relationships with their fans. So I'll try to make this more simple and understandable, but there are people out there like video makers and podcasters and musicians and writers and even marketers, right? That want to create something and share it and help people learn or see, what they're up to. So they're able to do that, plus make a salary using Patreon. So creators offer their fans a monthly membership. And I was just going to mention that I've been part of DGMG's Patreon group, Dave Gerhardt's marketing group. And I've been paying $10 a month for months now, and it's been very valuable. And $10 seems like nothing, right? But when you're that creator and you have 2,000 or 3,000 fans, that's revenue, that's recurring revenue, and it is a stream, and it is amazing that this platform provides that access. So I find that it's really interesting because it's turning ad-based platforms on their head, right? So you don't have to do ad-based monetization like YouTube or Instagram. You be an influencer in that way. You can actually be a creator on Patreon and just charge $10 a month and have this recurring revenue. So it's great. I love it. And I'm so excited to have you here, Grace.
I'm so excited to be here. And it's wonderful to hear you talk about what Patreon is doing for so many people. And for the folks who, they see Patreon, some of them, they still have their ad revenue streams, and they have a whole plethora of ways that they are making their living. And I think success means different things to different people. There are people on Patreon who are earning hundreds of thousands or millions, and that's why they're there. And there are other people who are there for the direct relationship with their fans and adding value to their communities, or they're coming to Patreon because it was founded by a creator. Jack Conte is a creator himself, a musician, professional YouTuber. They're coming to Patreon because they want to grow their business. They want to be able to control what they're creating. They want to get closer to the people who love their work and do all of that in a troll-free environment. So the beautiful thing about Patreon is that we're able to cater to creators of so many different categories, multi-category creators, whether they're musicians or podcasters or making their own shows or making their own art. There's a place for them where they can be among their own people and feel that sense of belonging and safety, and that what they're doing is valued by this incredible group who are super supportive of them. So I'm always happy to talk about that with you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's great. I love that there's the connection already through that, and how like I'm using it right now. So you have held marketing leadership positions over the course of your career. I mentioned Flexport and Cloudless and Salesforce. Tell me I'm interested. How did you get to Patreon? How did you go from Flexport, which is more like logistics and supply chain, to Patreon, which is art and creators and community? Like, would love to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we want to be involved in missions that we believe in as marketers, because we're there to spread the word about these amazing solutions that companies have. I came to Flexport because I was recruited by a previous manager I'd had in the past who was awesome. And I was recruited by Patreon to join their team. And I had heard of Patreon in the past because I was a touring musician for 5 years. It's actually how I met my husband. He was my drummer. We met on MySpace, which definitely ages me, but tells you that I've been familiar with this platform. My fellow artists were familiar with this platform. And it really comes back to a memory that I have of my father, who's since passed away. He's one of my heroes, but he's someone who was incredibly artistic. He grew up, singing classically. And when he went to school and he was given the option to participate in the music classes that cost extra money, his parents said, we're really not going to invest in that for you because we don't think that that's a viable thing to be investing in, and you're going to need to do something safer with your life. And so my father saw more opportunity for me growing up, saying, hey, actually, you can be whoever you want to be, and you should dive into whatever creative pursuit you want to do. And I think it's that spirit that drew me to Patreon, because it's the same message that my father had for me, which is you can be whatever you want to be. You put in your time, you put in your hours, you have that work ethic and that drive, and you collaborate well with other people, you can create something beautiful for the world that makes this life meaningful. So that's what brought me to Patreon, and that's why I took the call. And when I got on the call with the recruiter, I think the first thing I said was, I need your company to succeed. The world needs your company to succeed. So regardless of whether or not I join the team, the world needs you. We need a renaissance of creativity. We need a growing middle class of creators, and we need millions of kids to grow up and consider creativity as a career, because that's what's going to heal the world, not only in the pandemic, but that's what makes this life meaningful for so many people across the globe, is that creativity.
Well, that really resonates with me. In my family, we have like part engineering, right? And then the other part is more artistic. My mom is a piano teacher. My dad's an engineer. So like that mesh of like the understanding of there's goodness that can come from both. It just depends on like, where are your strengths? Where is your curiosity? Where's your passion? And I love the message that you're sending. And also it makes sense during the pandemic as people jump on the this path of like, I need to start thinking about what do I really want to do, and how can I maybe pave the path for myself in a way that's meaningful for me. Patreon gives this ability for so many people. So that's, I love hearing that story. That's really cool. Sounds like you're a natural fit for the company.
Well, and that's such a wonderful exercise that you pointed to, what if we, and this is for any profession, if we walked out the door and we asked ourselves, how would I operate today if I had no fear? How would I operate if anything was possible? And to your point, many folks are now choosing creative careers because that's the way they want to operate. They want to walk out of the door fearless and do something that they think adds value to society and creates more community in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. Well, we'll talk more about creativity and how you approach that within marketing, because marketing is, the both worlds, creativity and also the analytical part of it. So would love to hear more about that from your experience. But first, let's talk about, like, did I miss anything that you wanted to say about Patreon? Like who you're for, what problem you're solving, if there's anything you want to bring up.
I would just say that, creators are here to foster community in a world where I think community can be harder and harder to build and harder to find, especially when we're remote. So having a safe community and bringing more value to that community and bringing access to unique heart-melting experiences, that's just something I don't see other companies creating right now. So I think that's what's unique about us when you look at the whole landscape out there of what's being supplied by other folks. So.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So you have now been at the company for over a year, which probably flew by. But tell me about your first days and weeks at Patreon. I would love to hear about, like, what was your focus? What did you do when you in those first days and weeks?
Yeah, so I was in the actual office for a week before we went entirely remote. This was right around when lockdowns were starting around the globe in San Francisco. And the mandate in coming in was, hey, we want to discover to what extent marketing can be a growth lever for the business. How can marketing amplify what is already a very strong word of mouth about this solution for creators? So I came in and got together, collaborated, and anything I'm going to say on this podcast, by the way, is because of the team behind it that's making all of this happen. It's not like I came in and said, boom, this is the answer. But we came in, we gelled a product marketing team, a newly forming creative team to discover, okay, what is the message we need to send to the world right now? First, it was just going to be about, the creative system and the fact that it's broken. It's not working for creators. How do we amplify that message that creators are putting value out there and that what they are getting in return is not right sized with the value that they're creating in the world? And then COVID hit very shortly, as I was joining, frankly, and Patreon became not only a way to better value art, but also a lifeline and a fountain of possibility for creators to live a different life, or at least to continue to grow their businesses and sustain themselves, and also to connect societies that were immediately going into the surprise isolation. So came in, thought we were just going to lines and talking about the broken creative system, and immediately was faced with this challenge to speak to the world about what to do when your tours are canceled because of COVID, what to do when that revenue stream that you thought was going to be your main one suddenly isn't. So not only are there events across the world that are shrinking or not happening, but there are also changing algorithms that are affecting people's incomes, and trying to help the world of creators rediscover what intimacy is with their fans, and that direct relationship in a remote world. So basically change everything, alter the messaging framework accordingly, and then go big in terms of a marketing mix that we've never had before. So that means actual paid promotion. That means getting better ambassadors and sort of defining our own narrative. Whereas before, I think, if you Google Patreon is or what it does, you might find other people talking about it. And this was our chance to say, hey, actually, we have a point of view about what our narrative is, how we're a lifeline during this really difficult time, and where we're going to help the creative economy go and heal.
That's so cool. Yeah, it's like a real shock, right? You're coming in there, and then you're going in the office, and then you're going home, and then your focus changes a bit, right? But it's an interesting creative challenge, I think, is what was kind of placed on you and the rest of the team. So very cool. So it sounds like you focused more on, like, you still focused on, like, what's our message that resonates with folks, especially during COVID times, and how do we where do we talk about it? How do we use paid? How do we use, like, ambassadors? And then your marketing team, right? And I think there's 40 people now, right, across a bunch of different teams. And let me know if I get anything wrong, but there's creative and brand and demand gen and product marketing and web engineering and marketing ops and customer marketing and events. That's a lot of different teams, right? They have to work in unison in order to be effective. Is there anything unique in the way that you're structured? Like, how do you make this work? What like maybe in the way that you lead these teams, anything that you do in terms of like tactics or specifics to get everyone on the same page? And because I mean that's a lot of teams, a lot of different people doing a lot. How do you kind of get the pulse on everything?
Well, the first thing I'll say is that we are a startup. It's always in flux. Which team is growing, which team is moving where, which team is doing what. So collaboration is even more key across all of the teams that you just mentioned. I think that regardless of which marketing organization we go to, the fundamentals are still crucial. And by fundamentals, I mean identify your target audience, identify their pain points, what's going to be valuable to them, how can you achieve their short-term and long-term goals, and then create content that's going to achieve their short-term and long-term goals that intersects with what you need to do for the business, and then put that content into unpaid channels, put that content into paid channels, and then be maniacal about your attention to detail in terms of what's working and what's not working. And when I say what's working and what's not working, I mean from an awareness and brand perspective, as well as an ROI positive perspective. So no matter what the organization is, you're trying to find that balance of awareness and direct response investment, regardless of whether it's campaigns, events, or digital that you're talking about bringing to the organization. What I think is unique about Patreon, and can be a pro and a con, is that we have an incredible pool of creators and patrons who are leaders in content creation. So number one, that puts pressure on us as a team to be the gold star when it comes to video creation, when it comes to creator collaboration, when it comes to what we're writing, what we're saying. I mean, like the podcasts we're developing, we need to meet our creators where they're at and set the bar, because they're looking to us for that. And that means that we need to, perhaps compared to other companies, invest more in creating good content, invest more in video, in social, because we have our finger on the pulse of a pool of people who do that for a living. It's their bread and butter. So we have to be in it with them. And I think that's the most important thing we need to convey to creators these days, is that we are in it with them. Now, that makes it, that's the fun challenge. The other thing that makes things easier for us is, okay, if you have this pool of wonderful creators, then you can better leverage and let them speak for the product, and you can let them speak for the solution. So we have creator ambassadors. We have so much user-generated content that we can leverage to speak the message across all of our channels and see what works that way. So it's a challenge to wrestle the narrative and to create a content marketing engine that is the gold star for creators. And it's also a blessing to have this pool of people who are creating magical, one-of-a-kind experiences and visuals that you can put out together on the web. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And who's the team that's responsible for like figuring out how to create that content by using user-generated content and like making use of these creator ambassadors? Just curious.
So there's three elements there. So something that I'm very proud of that we started in my time here is our creator ambassador program, where we take creators who we think are spreading the message that aligns with Patreon's values, right? So valuing art for the impact that it actually has, freedom of expression and owning the terms on which we create art, and also just educating and helping creators grow their businesses. There are creators who want to do that. So we have a head of creator programs who works with our brand team to put together, what is the right mix of activations we want to do with what types of creators across mediums. Okay, we want to make sure that we have somebody who's in visual arts and somebody who's in YouTubing and somebody who's in gaming who would be really great, and somebody who's in this region who's in Spain or France or whatever other country to speak for us and speak together and join together to help creators grow their businesses. Then there's always a marriage between the creative team and what I'll call the channel marketing team or the demand generation team in terms of where that content goes for what purpose. So for example, you'll have a social lead who is saying, all right, this is going to be the social calendar coming up, and here's what the theme of the campaign for next month could be. And then you have this stellar creative team thinking about, okay, what's a creative angle on that? How can we involve the community with the content we're going to make from that creator ambassador? And that can be anything from a combination of just putting that creator ambassador's work out there in terms of a story or a video with a prompt to an Instagram takeover, or putting up interactive things like crossword puzzles or things related to milestones in creative careers or International Women's Day, the creative elements that are going to give it that spark. So that was a long way to answer your question. In short, in a matrix organization, there are several teams that need to come together to make a creator ambassador program happen and to make a content marketing engine work. And it's no one team or one person.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what about the way that you lead these teams? Like, what do you do throughout the week to touch base with everybody? Do you have any particular things that work really well?
I think as a leader, my job is to provide guidance, to provide team building, and be accountable for results at the highest level. And by results, I mean the inputs, things like social engagement, as well as the outputs like revenue, right? So to provide guidance, what I'm doing, often guidance ends up being, getting out of the way as well. But on a very practical level, the team shares our priorities. We have, like Slack bots that come up on Mondays and Wednesdays that share what our priorities are. And then we have weekly team syncs in which we're talking through our priorities, raising FYIs and blockers. And then every week we have a team meeting in which we are boosting each other up by showing appreciation for what folks are doing to collaborate with each other. And then each week we have someone talk about what is their objective that they're working on right then, and what are the collaboration touch points with other folks on the team. And then the rest of the team can raise questions, and we're taking notes, we're recording those meetings, and we're sharing them with other groups as well. And then when I see that we have certain blockers that are with other teams across the organization, I can meet with those other leaders and see how we can get them unblocked so that we can keep moving fast and running ahead together.
Awesome. And I mean, you basically probably started this method of leading right from the start, right? Because everybody went remote. Now you need to figure out a way of like, can we make these sessions, these meetings, not have too many of them, but still have like productive meetings. So has it been the same throughout the pandemic? Have you changed anything?
All right. So we do have a remote global team, and I've had remote teams before, but this was an in-person super social team for the most part that then had to go remote because of COVID. So it was a different level of adjustment in terms of creating social environments and connection points that didn't have any pressure on the teams, where they didn't have to be on, they didn't have to prepare a presentation to get together and brainstorm or understand each other's priorities or what was going on in their lives, beyond work. So that's one thing. The other thing is, and you probably heard this, that many remote teams are experiencing that they're working even longer hours and they're having even more meetings than they had before they went remote. So recently our team just instituted no meeting Wednesdays. And the idea of this is that many marketers really have a lot of heads down work they need to do. The product marketers are busy curating and creating and researching and promoting content about our buyers and our products and the landscape of creators. Our copywriters are heads down writing our blogs, writing our point of view, writing our brand voice guidelines. Our lifecycle marketers and our marketing ops professionals, they're busy testing, for our Marketo implementations and migrating our systems and building data pipelines so that we have better tracking of our touch points and what our impact is. And you can't do that if you're stuck in meetings all day. So I think it helps from the top down, to understand, okay, what are some of the ideas that might help us be more productive, and then to implement those to give everybody permission to have that breathing room in a remote environment.
Ooh, love it. Love these like new, just like, let's come up with a way to come up with a rule, give people the time that they need to get their work done. Because it's, I see where you're coming from that. And that's great that you shared that. So let's talk about Patreon's marketing. you talked about the fact that when you joined, there was already like huge word of mouth happening. It was, that was pretty effective. And then you started to bring in more of the systematic, like how do we approach marketing, what channels to spread the message. So what's working really well for you right now? What channels?
Well, if we think about the levers at our disposal, a big amount of our traffic and signups come in because creators are talking about us. They're Googling us by name, and they're typing in patreon.com directly. And the reason they're doing that is because they're hearing about us through things like press. Press always has a major impact on the marketing funnel, tons of impressions, and that's happening globally. And also because our creator ambassadors are consistently sharing content in their own communities on their own channels. So we're effectively sharing audiences as we help creators grow their businesses. And then some of the basic marketing levers are there as well, right? So search engine marketing, super effective, direct response, right? And then owned social gets better and better as we then hone the content that's going there, as we hone the look and the feel of what we're presenting, as we leverage more user-generated content. Even things like our YouTube channel, the more we put things there that are educational. I think that our blog and our video presence does better and better the more we put pieces of content there that show creators how to excel and simplify, because there's a lot to think about if you're a creator. It's a really considered purchase. What are the things I want to offer to my community? What are the expectations I want to set? What workload can I handle, right? So we try to help our creators think through that. So traditionally, campaigns, events, digital, and I would say one of the things that we're still working on that we have not figured out. So I mentioned the channels that I feel like, okay, we're really starting to see the impact, whether it's through influence or directly attributable impact that you may be familiar with. I think the channel that we're just, really in its infancy because of COVID now is virtual experiences and events. We can see, when registrations are going up, but I think the impact of virtual experiences and, sponsoring of virtual conferences and things like that is something that we still need to figure out, and we need to, because that's another place where our community is thriving and we need to be present.
Yeah, I'd love to ask you, because your content is just like, you guys have so much, the users are generating the content, you have your creative teams that are thinking through like, what content do we share? What are some like really interesting learnings maybe over the course of this year? Like you tried something with sharing on social, but like you realize that doesn't work as well, and this is the direction you want to head. Any like specific learnings you can share?
Sure. Well, I think part of the reason why we started a creator ambassador program was because we were going into a sponsorship at South by Southwest. And when that event canceled, we pivoted to a streamathon event that was fantastic. We had many of the creators that were going to present in South by Southwest come and be at that virtual event. But we didn't really see attendance at that event far above and beyond what we would expect just from our current user base. And so we realized we needed to expand beyond that. And that's where the Creator Ambassador Program originated from. And that's where we saw impressions and traffic coming in that we, hopefully wouldn't have otherwise seen. So that's one thing. Other thing that we thought about, and I think this also goes back to like the YouTube algorithm, we thought that if we're producing content, or our creator ambassadors are producing content every week, then that's automatically going to result in more interest. And the fact of the matter is, you don't need to produce content as frequently. If you're producing content that maybe is more produced or even more authentic, but at the end of the day, more valuable to your community, then maybe producing once a month actually gets you the impressions you're trying to get, more so than producing on a more frequent basis. So that's another learning that we've had. And then
Wow.
it just goes, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's really interesting, because my mindset has always been like, oh man, I'm always behind. I should be producing more content. I should be on LinkedIn more. I should be on Twitter posting daily. But it's not always about that, right? It's if you can post something really, really good once a month on YouTube versus every week on YouTube. That actually works well too.
Yep. Yep. And understanding that, and this is the case for every marketing channel, when you start, let's say you have different pillars, like education might be a pillar. Like there are certain things that you think your audience wants to get out of the relationship with you, and education might be one of them. And you start putting the content out on that channel, you're naturally probably going to shed some followers or some people on that channel who might have expected something different from you. And so there's this evolution in terms of what your current users or your current people in a certain channel might be expecting, and what you want to be providing to attract additional users. And so you have to understand the amount of patience that it takes to let the channels unfold themselves. It's similar to paid marketing. There may be certain channels that you're getting into that channel and your cost per acquisition is hundreds when you want it to be tens or lower. And it takes a certain amount of time to change your content and for the market to understand what you're offering in order for that channel to yield what you'd like it to over time.
It's a really nice way to put it, and a great way to think about it. That's why consistency and then also listening is important, right? Like, are your users getting the value? Do they are you hearing that? Are you getting the engagement? And then kind of do the twists and turns in order to keep them and then get additional folks. And your content will change over time, probably.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah, for sure.
That's really cool. Great. Thanks for diving deeper on some of that stuff. Actually, I wanted to ask you about the virtual events challenge, which is probably challenging for many companies. How are you approaching that channel? Like, what do you think you're going to start doing, testing, trying out in order to figure out how to make that channel work for you?
I think that the future of virtual events for us is defined by the needs of our community and what they would like to see. And our community of creators wants to hear from other creators more than they necessarily want to hear from Patreon. So they want a panel of their peers. They want to hear how ambassadors are growing their business. They want to hear how they scale and grow. And some of them want to hire people, rent out office space and expand to new countries, and others are actually just they want tips on how to create the best merch. So everybody wants something different. So I think having more panels of creators, I think they also want to see diverse voices that are already on the platform, but that we want to shed more light on and bring a spotlight to. So I see more, it's kind of like user-generated content. I see more events in our future that are defined by what the community is demanding, rather than necessarily, oh, these are the industry must go to or must have types of events, like the typical webinar, the typical third-party conference. I feel like we're going to see more intimate, community-focused events based on what the rallying cry is for what's needed.
Well, I'm definitely going to keep track of what Patreon's up to, because I feel like you guys are like a good example of stepping outside the box and just thinking ahead. Like, what's the future of virtual events, and how do you think about your users and ambassadors, and really listening to what do your users want, and then not to approach it the way that everybody else does. So I will be watching closely. Who would you say are some of the top Patreon creators? Like, what does it take to be successful on the platform? And you started to mention a little bit about how you can actually have really high production value and post just once a month on YouTube and grow your audience that way. You don't have to do a weekly thing. But who are some of those top creators? I'd love to hear.
Well, I mean, speaking of posting time, we actually, on YouTube, if you search for Creator News Patreon, we partnered with TubeFilter to release a series of videos that talk about creator burnout and how to avoid it. So that's one thing to check out. Success looks different for every creator, right? So success for someone like Alyssa White-Glutz, who's one of our creator ambassadors. She's somebody who has a super impressive following for her metal career, who had events as one of her main revenue streams, and has been able to continue producing music, continue supporting herself because she has a Patreon. And she is she's a shining light and to so many other creators out there in terms of being able to, she hires musicians to come and perform with her live. She actually came to some of our internal company events and played music live for us. So she's still a huge presence online and an example of somebody who's been able to diversify their income streams and continue doing what she loves. And then there are other folks, like, if I'm just thinking local here, like Megan Slankard, I'll give a shout out to someone who I was aware of when I was a touring musician, who wanted to stay, fiercely wanted to stay independent and write the songs that she wants to write, with little pressure from the outside to write in a different way. And when you have a community supporting you, then you can continue to do that. And I've seen her maintain that fierce independence over her career because of that. Someone else that I pledge to is Megan Murphy over in Chicago, who she has an illustrious theater career. So this is someone who has been on the stage her entire life, and she actually travels around the globe. She used to do this on cruises, and now what she's done is she has filmed her adventures on cruises as a performer around the world and turn those into snackable pieces of content just for her subscribers, which I think is really creative and just something different than many other folks are doing. So those are just a couple of examples that aren't, I don't think even the level of earnings is the common theme there. I think they're all trying to do pretty different things.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing those examples from across the country. That's super cool. Are you also, do you have some, you are global, right? So you probably have some top creators in other countries. Is there anyone you can think of that is in another country?
Yeah, and we do have headquarters in San Francisco, but also New York, Omaha, Porto, Portugal, Berlin in Germany, and then Dublin, Ireland as well. So we are across the world, and we have creators and patrons in cities far beyond that. One that comes to mind is there's this very cool band called While She Sleeps out of the UK, and they actually held a fake press conference to launch their Patreon that was about them going independent and deciding to take this leap and actually trust their fan base to direct the rest of their career. So they made this really cool video. I mean, most people watching it, you would think it was a real press conference that got tons of attention for them taking their career online to their fans. And I think it's just incredible.
Well, I'm going to have to look that up. So they created their own PR basically, right? And then their fans helped to spread the word most likely. Yeah. So what's the name?
While She Sleeps.
While She Sleeps. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Let's talk about some marketing ideas in the past year, maybe, or even prior. What are some really good marketing ideas that you've come up with?
I'm going to give credit to our creative team on this one and our social team. We had I'll call this a social content marketing idea that was the Thankathon. And what they came up with was, hey, how can we visually celebrate creativity as a company in a way that's also going to do the marketing job of spreading the word about what we offer? And we drank our own champagne by hiring some creators who are fantastic at illustrating. And we offered up to the world via our own social accounts, hey, who do you want to thank this Thanksgiving? What creator do you just love and you're so glad because they're creating value in your life? We will have these creators who we've contracted create an illustration to thank you. And there was even a great illustration. Somebody said thank you. It was like an ironic drawing or sarcastic drawing about thanking trolls. Like thank you, but no thank you. So people did have a lot of fun with it, but we saw so many creators, so many patrons just thanking creators for the work that they do. And then because there was an illustration associated with each one of those, you get this, viral spread of the art going out to the world. And then that increases engagement and social followers, which are some of our inputs to get those marketing outputs. So there's one idea.
I love that. I love that so much. I missed that. I did not see that. I wish I did, but I'll definitely have to check that out too. And so creativity, we've talked about like your teams are just top notch, and you really do spend the time to think of new ways to approach like old things that are part of marketing and design and being creative. How do you keep your marketing fresh? How do you personally stay creative?
I think we have a lot to learn from other functions and from other businesses that may not be in our actual space, right? So we can take inspiration from, if we're a social media company, if we're a solution company for creators, we can still learn from other companies like GoPro or folks that are doing really fun things that are not in our own wheelhouse, so to speak, in terms of what we offer as a company. The other thing that's really important is training and development. So one thing I do at our company is I run a storytelling training where I've just taken all the trainings that I've had from various third parties and from other mentors at the companies that I've worked at, and I put on that storytelling training, not just for our function, but for other functions at our company, to remind us of, storytelling is really the key to what makes our content valuable and what makes our ideas live out in the wild. So I think bringing everything back to storytelling is always a way to make our content fresh and always a way to make our tactics fresh. And then again, as I said, collaborating with other teams like data science, engineering, and even product to understand their experiment methodology and bringing that rigor to our own organization. Optimization is what gets you to innovate, right?
Yeah, that's great. And then also there's this idea of putting together a bunch of different people in a room from different walks of life and different expertise, and then you kind of like talk through a challenge or work on a campaign, and you get some fresh creative ideas just from that, from being able to connect the dots from, with people thinking through in more complex ways than they otherwise would have. So
yeah, and you actually reminded me that I do go out and have a distanced hangout with colleagues from other companies that either I've worked with them before or I reached out to them specifically to bounce our strategies and our ideas off of them, because I think at our companies we create our own echo chambers, and sometimes the only way to get out of that is to go and network with other people and say, all right, this is our marketing strategy. What's my blind spot? What am I missing here?
Absolutely. That's great. Do you have like any coaches that you talk to? I know there's plenty of leaders that have coaches, and you want to bounce ideas. You want to figure out new ways of handling certain challenges. Do you also use that?
I actually had a friend tell me years ago when I was getting my MBA that he had a board of advisors for his life, meaning that he had someone on his board for each area of his life, whether it was relationships or career, or he was a product leader, right? Or product, innovation. And I'm a firm believer of that. I think sometimes the answer to life's problems is all of the above. It's not just this one thing. There's no silver bullet. And all of the above means a village of advisors. So if that is an executive coach and or a therapist, and or if you're at a company where you're using a tool like BetterUp, or you have an internal company mentor program, do all of the above. Do all of the above, because it makes the ideas better. And also I think we learn from our direct reports as well, right? Like you said, there are lots of orgs that come together to make marketing happen, and we're all educating each other constantly. So try and say yes to as much of that as possible. That would be my advice.
Yeah, thank you for that. So what about some bad recommendations in marketing that you have come across? Maybe you were given in the past? Anything that comes
Hmm.
to mind as a bad recommendation?
I think that whenever we assume that there's something that has worked well for another company, so it will work well for this one, and so we run towards that like it's a shiny object, we get into trouble. An example of that might be, hey, I've been at another company where generating a glossary, online glossary of terms related to this area that the product is about, um, was really successful in driving up the search engine optimization of this company. So that must work for you in your area. Well, if you just immediately take that advice at face value and think, well, that person they're in this position and that worked at that other company, so that, I'm just going to assume that'll work for us. And you drop some foundational marketing work to run and pursue that, you're going to spend a lot of time and energy on something that may not pan out, and that could be very work intensive for your team and even lead to burnout. So I would say anything that you're doing just because someone else is doing it, I would be very wary.
Yeah, so the place that folks should start with marketing and what to actually do is always from that foundation, right? Is kind of your guidance is to come in kind of like open-minded, right? Every company is
Mm-hmm.
different, but the way you approach marketing systematically stays the same, right? Just like you mentioned at the beginning of this episode, where you
Mm-hmm.
need to understand who is your target audience, what's the messaging that resonates with them, what's the problem that you're solving, where
Mm-hmm.
are they spending their time, and
Mm-hmm.
that's how you go about doing that.
Well, the common denominator is customer obsession, and everything comes back to that. So if a new idea comes in that is about customer obsession and is going to serve the customer's needs in a better way than something else you've already put on your plate, then swap it out and keep on running. But that is the litmus test that has to be done at every point in order for marketing to be effective.
Yeah, that's a great point. Let's talk about failure. So when
Yes.
we step out of our comfort zones, it's part of
Mm-hmm.
life, right? You're going
Mm-hmm.
to fail at some things and learn hopefully from that. So what would you say is your favorite failure?
Mm. I think if I look back, I'll go to a previous company. We were offering up a new product, and we were very ambitious with this product, and we wanted to democratize data and bring that democratization of data to the world, which is a very lofty and beautiful goal. It's a goal for a business analytics, a data visualization product. And it's a beautiful, beautiful idea. The problem was that other companies had been in the business of doing that for over 30 years, and our company was not known for doing that. So we started out with that messaging, and we saw the revenue wasn't coming in, and folks weren't answering people's sales calls. So we had to go back to the table, again, back to the customer, the potential customer, and do some research and ask, okay, well, what are their primary pain points and what are the things that are most important to them? And it turns out, for them, from a business analytics perspective, our target customer, the most important thing to them was having a solution that was easily accessible, that was native to the platform they were already on. And so we actually changed our messaging and got a lot more targeted and called our solution the best solution for customers of X. And X is a super large recognizable company with a high market share. And we realized that the differentiator was really the fact that our solution was already within that platform and already integrated and already seamless. And while yes, business analytics is democratizing data and changing the world, the way to actually solve these customers' problems and get a foothold in the marketplace was to better cater to their specific needs in the way that we talked about the product.
This is exactly what it means to like do to want to push your message that you think is the right approach, and then it and then it falls flat because you're, for whatever reason, maybe the competition is better known for that, but then you go to your customer, you hear it from their mouth, and then you better understand it and you change your message, and then from what I gather, the change worked well, sounds like.
Oh yeah, absolutely worked well. Then the following year we were hitting and surpassing our goals. So it was an exercise that was absolutely worth it. The other mistakes that I've made in the past are related to web designs. I'll give you other examples. If we change too little on the web, then we won't see significant gains in conversion on our web properties. However, if we change too many things and we just roll out a complete redesign of our web properties and it doesn't work, like let's say conversion goes down, if we change too many things, it's really hard to point to what didn't work. So, and by then you've spent all of this time and energy to do the A/B testing with your engineers. So actually backing up and meeting in the middle where you're going to change just a couple things, but not too few, that you're not taking chances, not taking risks to make big gains, but not so many that you can't derive hypotheses on why it didn't work or why it's working. And then doing some preliminary, just high-level user testing before putting those A/B tests live. And then thinking, what's your backup plan? Like if they don't work, is there some way you want to keep the test live and then mitigate by adding this other change? You can get much better results with alterations to web properties. So it's the Goldilocks phenomenon when it comes to web property testing that I would want to advocate for, companies big or small. But it becomes even more important when you're at a company that has so much traffic and such volume of signups and inbound revenue that any change you make can have profound impact to the business.
And then it's probably harder to make the case for like, we want these two changes, but they're kind of big, right? But we need to be okay with like changing that because we really believe that that's going to have a big impact on conversions or, what have you. So
that's another good point. We always need to balance the needs of brand and ROI. For example, there may be ads that are way more effective if every single ad just says earn more money on it. And that might lead me to think, all right, well, if more people are clicking on the ads that say earn more money, then that must be the thing to put out there. But if what we're really doing for creators is enabling them to provide value to their communities, and we're enabling patrons to discover artists that bring value to their lives, then we need to put that message out into the world, even if it's not the clickbait that just saying earn more money might be. So there has to be a balance.
Yeah, it's the whole idea of like brand must always be together with like the demand that you're generating and not to, think of them in silos. So thank you for sharing that. With just a little bit of time left, I would love to ask you, is there anything that you want to share that's like personal, maybe strange, that you love, but others might not quite get it?
I think if I had a pet peeve in marketing, I would talk about, the difference between presentations and documents, and when you're meant to be presenting something live and driving an agenda versus when you're providing documentation and information that people should just read offline. So that would be a pet peeve of mine. If there was something interesting about me, I would say I think it's really important for every person to have an activity that they do that they're not naturally good at, so that they're always stretching themselves. An example would be that I took up bread making during COVID, which is no surprise. That's super trendy right now. I also took up roller skating, which I am just horrible at. But the reason why is we need to be reminded of the joy of life during this time. And we also need to think beyond just what we're good at. As a marketer, I can't think, oh, well, this is the channel I know, so that's what I'm going to focus on because I feel comfortable with it. I think it's important to get outside our comfort zone, and especially if we can do it in a fun way, all the better.
Oh, love that message. Thank you for sharing. both of those messages. Thank you, Grace, for your time today. I got some creative juices flowing, honestly, and I'm inspired, and I learned a lot from you. So thank you. If anybody wants to reach Grace, she's on LinkedIn, Grace Woods. And to find out more about Patreon, you can go to patreon.com. Thank you, Grace.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.